Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil YouTube FAQ video. Today we've got Season 6 FAQ number 5. As per usual, Dean has sent me a list of questions that are from the YouTube videos. We're always asking you to comment and leave these questions, and then we go through. Dean will pick them out and I'll answer them right here on the camera. So like usual, I'm just gonna jump in. Let's start. Chop Chop Grow says, I have thrips, what do I do? There's lots of different things to do, and answering it, you're gonna get different answers depending on who you're asking, as far as whether it's a commercial grow or whether it's a home grow. And the reason why is in commercial grow, they only have so many products that they can use that are registered. And the first product that I'm gonna recommend, because I know it just works with thrips, it's not allowed for commercial use. And I believe the reason why is just because people abuse it, and they use it for caterpillars and other reasons. They'll spray it on flowers, but if used in veg to spray the soil as well as the plant, usually 1 to 2 applications is good. And Clackamas Coot turned me onto this product a long time ago. It's called Spinosad. The one that we use is Captain Jack's, and he kind of called it the organic nuclear bomb. Like when neem oil and an emulsifier wasn't working, or if you had something like thrips that it's just known to work so well on, you could grab that bottle and you could use this biological product. Now, I believe Spinosad's the one that they found in a rum distillery. I could be wrong. I'm just obviously off the top of my head here. I'd have to look it up, but it's a natural bacteria. And when you spray it, it basically interrupts the thrips life cycle and they're gone. And so 1 to 2 applications, I recommend the 2, just because application is part of whether you did it right or wrong. If you didn't get all of the soil or all of the plant, and there's some that are still alive, then you're gonna have it show back up. But that's the go-to. That works really well. So 2 applications of like Captain Jack's we offered at BuildASoil. If you're in a commercial grow, obviously you're gonna have to use whatever is allowed in your state. Next from there, just make it inhospitable for them. So a product like EM5 or any homemade concoction with vinegar and alcohol and essential oils and things that are clean ingredients that you know to be safe for your plant, you can try different dilution ratios and it'll really mess with them, and it'll make it a lot harder for them to take over. And a healthy plant and a knockdown is a lot of times all you need. The Spinosad will get rid of it. The other thing that I've been using as a newer product, so I'm hesitant to tell you that it'll work for sure, but I really believe it will, that's the OrganiShield. I got it because the tropical tent had some mealybug that came in on the coffee plants and I got rid of them, but some of the mealybug was popping up in other places. I've been using that and it's been working really, really well. And it's from, they found it as far as plants produce this particular sugar, and it's a special compound, and it basically off gases immediately, and it doesn't produce any like harmful effects. It's good for it doesn't hurt bees and ladybugs and all of that. So it's high on my list of, I hope this works really well. And so far the results have been good. So that would be one that I'd also try for thrips. Of course, the go-to that Coot taught us a long time ago was to get really good neem oil, like from Ahimsa, and emulsify it using like our Kuyaha or using Axel 16, which is potassium silicate. That's one way to emulsify it and you get a really good effect. Otherwise, Spinosad is like my go-to. So hopefully that answers your question. Get a sip here. Okay, Mojo Spikes from Discord. What's up, Mojo? He says, I have a question about plants seeding themselves. I noticed Jeremy's concern with the new tray to grow systems being very wet in the bottom, and I read a few people pointing to overwatering as a possible cause of this. Anyone getting herms with a sub-watering system? I'll leave that question up to the users. They can answer on this video. Have you ever experienced hermaphrodites, or have you ever sent a plant to get some nanners somewhere on it because you were overwatering? Now, I'm gonna go out there and say, I don't think this is gonna be a problem. Like the saturation level, if you just leave the tray to grow on, I don't think you're gonna get hermaphrodites. Now, could it mean that you have a finicky plant that might be easier to trigger and it's possible that it could cause a little bit? Sure. I feel like we're dealing with a plant that it's been this way forever. And so obviously we can breed those characteristics out of it as far as the ability to throw nanners either early or late. To me, if it happens early, it's a big issue. And to me, I think that's more genetic. If it happens late and you think that you caused it, obviously stressors would be a main concern, light leaks, things like that. I do know some people that think that the littlest, like if you have the littlest light, it's gonna cause a problem, and a little bit overwatering or too much defoliation, that's not been my experience. When I have decent genetics, I might find a couple seeds here and there, a nanner that popped that kind of like maybe upset me, but never a major problem. To me, that's more genetic oriented if it really is popping off. Otherwise, as far as the tray to grow, Some people have been running it that wet and not having issues. So could it be possible that some genetics go that way? I think so, but I would say that it's the exception, not the rule. And as far as the Trader Grow being too wet on the bottom, we're gonna be releasing a product soon that pairs with the EcoWit, will allow it to automate so that you can turn your reservoir on or off. That way you get to the dryback level that you want using the EcoWit deep or shallow or however you wanna set it up. So I'll talk about that in the next couple of weeks as that comes out, and I'll be playing with it. Otherwise, man, I'm really happy with the Trader Grow. Obadiah from Discord, what's up, bro? Says, I'm building a greenhouse this year. Congratulations, by the way. We got some grassroots raised beds and fabric bags for the greenhouse. We'll most likely be growing vegetables through the cool months. I want to layer BuildASoil Light recipe with homemade hot compost, homemade worm castings, and native Arizona soil. How deep should I make each layer, or should I just mix it in before? If so, with what ratios would you mix it? Short answer is it's all gonna work. Those are great inputs. I don't think you're really gonna go wrong. You might have one way of mixing it where you have a little more moisture holding, and the way that you irrigate might be slightly different, where if you make it way fluffier and it drains a lot faster, you might have to irrigate slightly different. Either way, you can accommodate for those over the long term once you get used to your greenhouse. My buddy Weston has some greenhouses out in this area, and one of the things he did in his raised beds was mix the native soil with potting soil. And he did that, I believe, for most of the bed, and then like the top 6 inches, he just put with regular potting soil. You can also mix it completely, like 50-50. A lot of people like to use the native soil. More native soil in a raised bed is gonna hold a little bit more water, but I don't have exact ratios from you. I don't have experience to say, I've done this ratio and that ratio, or this layer and that layer. I just think that it works really well, regardless, when you have a whole big volume of good stuff and you have the sun and you have a greenhouse. So don't overthink it too much. But as far as using hot compost, homemade worm castings, and native Arizona soil, keep regular percentages of like compost and castings, because that's obviously a lot of the percentages, so don't go over 30%. With homemade stuff, sometimes I'll use a little bit less because I can always add more to the top, but I can't pull it back out once I've already mixed it. Native Arizona soil, I'm not sure what your soil looks like as far as like how alkaline or acidic or how loamy or sandy or whatever, but you can keep that in consideration for the percentage. A lot of people, when they're really trying to make like a raised bed mix, they'll only mix like 10 to 20% topsoil. But I think up to 50% is totally acceptable for that type of scenario, especially in a greenhouse. Yeah, that's my suggestion. Really, don't overthink it. Obviously, if you have somebody that's done this before with your type of soil, you could take suggestions from them. But for me, I would just mix it all in, at least the big bulk of it to save on money. And then that top layer I would leave to be kind of the premium zone. And then you could always do a little bit more soil if like you're looking for a plant that you know is gonna be bigger, by digging out some of that and filling it in with potting soil later on, depending on how you plant your greenhouse. But man, topsoil and potting soil and all of that when you have large area works really, really well. In our greenhouse, in the vegetable greenhouse, we basically did that. We mixed in like peat and compost and a few things into the native soil before we started planting into it. But of course it's tapping in, and any deeper than a few inches is all native soil, and it produces really, really well over there. So Obadiah, thanks for asking the question. I'm sorry I couldn't give you a more precise answer, but I'd like to keep it honest, and I do think you're gonna do well no matter how you do it. All right, Rick says, would there be any additional benefit to doing a Miles style extract or an FFJ with a bag of gnarly barley? I appreciate all the good videos. Thanks, Rick. All right, so this is a question about the gnarly barley, which is a sprouted seed tea, but instead of a tea, this is just basically sprouted seeds that have been re-dried in a bag. We offer them at BuildASoil. A lot of times people use this for beer brewing. That's where it comes from. But then our seeds come from the nutraceutical industry, where they're using sprouted seeds to make like heady ancient breads and things like that, where you want to have food grade sprouted seeds. And the reason why that exists is because Clackamas Coot, and he started using sprouted seeds and the enzymes created in the garden, and the results are absolutely phenomenal. And so would there be a benefit, like additional, instead of just using the sprouted seeds already dried, like the gnarly barley, to do an FFJ? Now, FFJ is a fermented fruit juice, and so that's different than like a fermented plant extract. Typically an FFJ is where, I believe, you use like equal parts of the fruit, and you're gonna use sugar, and it's gonna be a lot sappier and thicker. We're not talking like a lacto liquid fermentation with small amounts of organic matter and a lot of liquid. So I'm thinking maybe you're talking about doing like a ferment of the gnarly barley, which early on when Coot was talking about sprouted seeds, you can find out there on like IC Mag comments where he had done sprouted seed teas and then covered it in water and then added in additional ingredients like humic acid and things like this, rock dust, and kind of fermented it for a day or two. Part of that was because in the beginning, Coot was referencing, along with all the things he was teaching us, Gilcarendang and some of that Korean natural farming. And on the Gil Carindang website, Patrick at that time was the mod there, and he was the one posting the recipes and actually creating the website to share what was going on with Gil. And some of these recipes were phenomenal, and they were like for a small jar, so you can make really small amounts of ferments. Well, once Coots started doing the sprouted seed teas, I saw Patrick had put up a sprouted seed tea ferment recipe up on to Gil Carindang. And so I'm not gonna say there's no benefit, but Coot was always like, man, I've found after all that experimenting, the best is just to use the gnarly barley or to use the sprouted seed tea or the, the malted seeds just as is. But that's because he really does like simplicity. And I think that there may be some benefit from fermenting it as far as the food source for the ferment with all the enzymes, the biology, and anything else that you add to it. And it would be worth experimenting. But just so you know, I've not done it. I'm just relaying what little I know about fermenting some sprouted seeds. So maybe go ahead and try it. Try it in a small amount. You could always Google that Gil Carindang recipe and see if he's still got it. Although it's with fresh sprouted seeds, it would work really similarly. So, and then Miles, if you're watching this, maybe you could comment, maybe you've done some sort of sprouted seed tea ferment. My initial thought when I first saw the ferment of sprouted seed tea was like, how are you preserving enzymes through a ferment? But man, nature continually blows my mind. And a lot of times when I think I understand something, I'm just kind of grasping it. But I see positive results, and that's what's most important. So let's see, next question. Mr. THRIPS, can I plant a plant in my earth box right away after cutting one down? Yes. So depending on how high you've mounded it, it might create a situation where it's hard to top dress for the next go. A lot of times I'll scrape the top layer so it's even with the sides of the earth box, and I'll slop that into the worm bin. I've already harvested the plant, I'll scrape the top, and then I'll plant another plant right in next to it. Or you can twist the rootstock out, plant right back in the same spot, and then you can just go again. Just like setting up a fresh earth box, I would make sure you don't start bottom watering until your new plant has roots that have taken over the system a little bit. Maybe veg for 1 or 2 weeks before you start bottom watering, especially so with a recycled soil because it might hold just a little more water than a fresh soil. Let's see, next question. Redneck Hippie says, thanks so much for all your work. You're welcome. The BAS way has helped me produce high quality meds. Good, I'm glad. That's the point of all this, right? Quick question, how big is too big for an earth box? I grow them out big enough to fill a 2x4 space. It seems like it might be too much. Just trust your gut. Right now in the 10x10 series for season 6, we have 2 earth boxes, and it's basically covering an entire 5x5 area. That means that one earth box is covering a 2.5 by 5 foot area, which is bigger than the 2x4 area that you're discussing. I still think it's a little bit too big, but it's pumping, it's doing it, and the quality looks good, so it's absolutely possible. I just think that across a variety of genetics and the length of veg time versus flower time, all these things combined, I'd prefer to have it just a little bit smaller, maybe throw 4 earth boxes in the same space that I have, or 6 earth boxes in the same space. So that's up to you, but I'm constantly blown away at what an earth box really can do. Part of me wonders how easy it is to continue to no-till when you kind of max out or overdo a container. I think part of the BuildASoil way is to like maybe do half of what the soil's capable of so that it's easier to keep around forever instead of fully depleting the soil and then really having to add a lot back for the next round. So that's my 2 cents there, Redneck Hippie. Great question. Okay, next one, Davey. Davey says, in the 4x4 tent with the 4 15 gallons, what number are you looking for on an EcoWit when you decide to water? So I should be paying attention more, but I've done this a few times and I have been looking at it from time to time. I've just been watering on my instinct. And so what I typically do is I go in there and I check every day. If it looks like it's still pretty moist and the plants are happy, I'll skip a day. Otherwise, I'll water a small amount. And then after a week of doing that, I'll do one big deep water to make sure I'm not missing out on any deep watering there. When I look at the EcoWit, typically from the top, I'm not gonna use that to replace my deep watering routine, which is gonna be done at least once or twice during flower, especially during the stretch. But what I'm looking for, number-wise, to answer your question, on the EcoWit, I'm usually looking for 21, 22% as like the lowest. 25%, I might even water instead of waiting till the next day. And then when I water, it should go up to like 45, 50%, and then very quickly after return to that 30% zone, 35%, and then slowly work its way back down to that 25 and under percentage where I water again. There are some nuances there. Like if you've built a lasagna mulch layer and it might be drying back slightly quicker than the rest of the soil, I keep mine buried kind of in that original zone and I try not to move it. And those numbers seem to work really well for me. So hopefully that helps answer your question. What I do see is that the EcoWit reads more moist when I'm using blue mats and Trader Grows and Autopots. So it's possible that with hand watering, I could be holding back just a little bit, but I like that and it seems to work well when it comes to hand watering, because when we're hand watering, we're kind of giving it to it all at once and then backing off for a little while. So I like to overshoot and then let it creep back to a curve that's nice. And that's how I do it. So for more information, you can also check out the how to water. Like, we have an article if you go to BuildASoil under education. It doesn't talk about the EcoWit, but we will be updating with some of that information as we go further. Obviously, we want to continually update the education. Okay, Frey, how long is the veg on Strawberry Deluxe? Let me take a sip of coffee, and you could take this question a couple of ways, so I'll do my best here to answer it both ways. So if somebody was to tell me or ask me how long is the veg on this genetic, like Strawberry Deluxe, I'm taking that like, how long should I veg this genetic? To me, there's no veg time for any plant that's required. You can just flip to flower from seed or from clone, and there's no real reason. What dictates the reason for how long you veg is how much canopy space you need to fill. And that's dependent upon your environment and how bright your lights are and all these other things. So for us, if you're asking how long did we veg the Strawberry Deluxe for, what we did is we planted seeds and we grew those in 1 gallon for 6 weeks, which is long enough to tell sex. Now, the Strawberry Deluxe were feminized, so we didn't need to, but we had others we did. We kept them all uniformly the same in the 1 gallon, and we trimmed them back multiple times to make sure that they weren't too big when we went to transplant. After that 6 weeks, and after determining the sex of all the plants, we then transplanted for season 6. You can see that video, it's already out. And when we transplanted from that point to the point we flipped to flower, we vegged for 30 days. And 2 earth boxes filled up the entire 5x5, and 2 Trader Grows with 1 plant each filled up the other entire 5x5. So 30 days of veg was more than enough for those earth boxes after transplant. You can also add the 6 weeks of veg if you're gonna be starting from seed, because you'll have to start sexing them or whatever similarly. Now, if they're feminized, you could have shaved off probably 4 or 5 weeks from that veg time, because there's no reason to wait for them to show sex. So that's how I'd answer that question. As far as the veg length on any genetic, just not required. So in fact, vegging for a long time, I think, makes things slightly harder, because now you're more prone to health issues as the plant ages. These are annual flowering plants. So growing a full season outdoor plant is more challenging than immediately flipping to flower and getting a quick turnover indoors. Let's see, Mr. Dizzle, or MF Dizzle. How would you go about doing a sea of green and still growing fully organically? Let's say 6 plants in a 2x4, or big pots with multiple plants. If so, how big and how many plants? So I think the more the better. Let's take a 4x4 so you can see the number of square foot. There's 16 square feet in there. If you put 16 plants, you could basically plug your clone or your seedling in, 16 of them, and flip to flower immediately, and you'd have all tops, you'd have a full bed, especially if you had some good stretchers. And the nice thing is you wouldn't need many side branches to fill the entire canopy, so it'd be all tops, lollipopped with good size on all of them, and really good amounts of like active cannabinoids and all of the different things that we're after, like terpenes, where when you get big tops that have been broken down with lots of little tops and all the side branches growing up from below up, I feel like there's more difference between those types of nugs versus more plants that are all young and healthy, flip to flower with all tops on them. And so the sea of green to me in organic is identically the same. It's a matter of the amount of canopy and the amount of soil. So whether it's 16 plants or 2 plants, if that canopy is full and you've got a bed of soil, you're rocking. If you'd like to do that in smaller containers, obviously, let's say you did a 30 gallon. And a 30 gallon, let's say you put 3 plants in, that's 10 gallons per. So if you put 6 plants, that's only 5 gallons per. And so as long as you're flipping immediately, you could probably put 6 plants in a 30 gallon, but it'd be pushing it. I think 3 is probably more appropriate. When I look at a 4x4 bed and it's full, I mean, we're talking 150 gallons plus. So 150 gallons with 15, 16 plants, that's almost 10 gallons each. And so the way that you structure this is more like how much canopy space and how much soil, that's the real horsepower. Now, the fastest way to fill that canopy is just more plants. There's probably a diminishing point of return. If you were to go put, say, 90 plants in that space, you'd probably be wasting a lot of effort for transplanting, and they'd be fighting with each other a little too much. So when it comes to like the square foot method of gardening, usually when it comes to a bigger plant, it's 1 plant per square foot. And when I think about a bed, a 3x3, a 2x4, that's what I think. I think for each square foot, 1 plant, flip to flower, you'll be good to go. So that's my recommendation. Nicholas, if sprouted seed meal is incredible, and the BuildASoil sprouted meal is barley and corn, etc., would it be a good idea to make sprouted seed meal from mustard seeds? that way getting the benefits of the mustard and the enzymes of the sprouted seeds? Yes. So to be clear, when Coot taught us this, we started with organic popcorn seed because it was available at the grocery store and anybody could get it and try it that night and they would sprout and they could try a sprouted seed tea. But then we moved over to barley because it's easily available from the brewers and you can get whole organic barley and sprout it yourself. Then we started using organic malted seeds because they were already professionally sprouted and then dried to have the peak enzyme content duplicatably the same for beer brewers. Then we found the nutraceutical product that had the corn, the lentil, the barley for diversity of not only the seed meal, but the enzymes. But Coot said, any seed you have works. I've used our 12 seed cover crop blend because it's got all this variety in there and I've sprouted those in a sprouter and then blended them up and made a sprouted seed tea. You could absolutely use mustard seed and a variety of others. If you're using something like mustard that has secondary compounds that are known to be harmful to plants for a short period of time, like the glucosinolate that's in mustard, be careful. Part of me thinks that when you sprout the seed, there's not going to be as much glucosinolate. It's going to be more enzymatic content unless it was more mature, but it wasn't the seed. The seed has been soaked though, and so that reaction is done. So I think you might be safe, but just with those special ones, right? Pay a little bit of attention to that. Otherwise, all seeds use this secret of life to get their energy flowing, and that's the enzyme process, so any of them should work. Man, great question. Miguel, what's the Discord name? Would love to connect with other growers. Good question. It's under BuildASoil, but the only way in is through the Patreon, which is not very active at all. The only way into the Discord, which is more active, is by way of that Patreon. And the reason why this was set up, we never wanted to set up like a paid option. But what we did on YouTube was we created a way where people could just donate if they wanted to, because it costs a lot to edit all of the videos and have someone spend however many hours per month making sure that it stays consistent, that we don't just fall off and stop posting these videos. And so it was great. People were just donating and it really helped offset the cost for BuildASoil since we can't monetize it as we're age restricted because of cannabis. But then they took away our ability to monetize it. So we created the Patreon groups that people could, if they wanted to, donate and keep these YouTube videos coming. And it relieves a lot of the burden from 12 months out of the year, every single week releasing videos. So we really appreciate you for that. Those that have chosen to donate and be a part of the Patreon, they get access to the Discord group. And it's a private bunch of people that have a whole bunch of cool stuff going on, and it's behind the scenes. And so I think it's really cool. It's kind of like by invite only if you're in the Patreon. So that's the way. If you've got questions, you can check it out, the BuildASoil Patreon. And then once you're in Patreon, you can't go to the Discord first. You have to go to Patreon. After that, you connect to your Patreon account through Patreon to our Discord, and that will allow the bots to give it access so that you can be in the group. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Last question, organically blunt, what's up? What are some of the current reads you picked up? Man, so I'm always reading different books. And so when I'm driving to work, I go through phases where for months at a time, weeks at a time, I'll be listening to just like personal development books on Audible because I have a decent drive. And there's so many, dozens of books. The hard books that I buy that I'm flipping through all the time, those are usually like the plant and soil ones because they're not as fun to listen to and they're really fun to pick through. So, gosh, I was posting about so many of them and they weren't really new either. They were just books that I pull back off the shelf and I'm reviewing. One of them was the Minerals for the Genetic Code. Let me just go grab the books right now because I've got another one that's brand new that I do want to share with you that I'm fascinated by. And then another one that's got like a long older title. It's like I'll just grab it. I'll be right back. All right, so some of these were on my desk that I was like taking pictures of and talking about. And so the first one is Acres USA is a great place to go. This is the One Straw Revolutionary. And by the way, I did get an update. I think it was Matt Davenport sent me a recent update on the Fukuoka family and what's been going on with the farm. But in any case, One Straw Revolutionary, great book. The One Straw Revolution was the book that Coot shared with me, and man, now I'm kind of going deeper. I was working a job in town and a lady showed up that owned an organic apple farm, and Coot had mentioned this book. She brought it up to me again and it was very strange, like, why were you here? Why were you mentioning this book? And then she actually lent it to me and I got to read it and it changed my life. And it's part of why I started BuildASoil and, you know, full circle. So that is a different one. It's called the One Straw Revolutionary, but I like all of his books. Then the one that I just got, someone emailed me and asked me to be a part of an event and they said this particular guy was coming out to speak. So I bought his book because I wanted to learn about him. I didn't even follow up with that event. I'm terrible at communication sometimes. We get so many responses via email. But this book is fascinating. It's called The ABC of Organic Agriculture, Phosphites and Stone Meal. And it's a practical manual, and it's several books in one. And it's almost like Jadam. It's literally formulas. And instead of just Jadam, this is a whole nother take on it. And so this guy, Rivera, he's been practically, like he says, basically he's got humus on his feet. He's got shit on his feet. He's been in the field, not just writing books. And these recipes, if I were to pull them up, the reason why I'm so fascinated is they're using EM1 and doing ferments and using whey and using kefir and using manure, right? Using cow manure and doing all these ferments, and they're adding micronutrients, and they're farming completely this way. And all the recipes are in here. And so to me, this one is new to me, okay, but very, very fascinating. I would Google that one. It shipped from overseas to me. This one was recommended by Growru back in the day. We used to be friends, and he did a lot of stuff for BuildASoil, and for whatever reason, he stopped talking to me as far as, you know, sometimes business, soil testing, all this stuff is like secret knowledge back in the day, and it's kind of coming to light. But he shared with me this book, Healthy Crops, A New Agricultural Revolution. And there's some really fascinating information in here. I think I took a couple pictures. If not, I was planning on it because there's info about like unfertilized crops and how healthy they are and what the results of doing high nitrogen fertilizer is, and a lot of things that we talk about as growers, how that might affect not just the fertility, but the response by the biology and the pests and everything else. This one I like a lot, Science in Agriculture, Advanced Methods for Sustainable Farming by Dr. Arden B. Anderson. Okay, that's a really good one. This is another Arden Anderson one, but that one I don't reference as often. Biological Ionization, as applies to farming and soil management. And this one is by Beto, and that one is fascinating to me. Really goes into energy and some other properties that we don't often talk about. And I learned a lot from this book, and a lot of the farming practices for acreage that they recommend in here are spot on. And so to me, when I see teaching that like comes together and makes sense from multiple things that I've learned, you come to realize that that's really special. And then this one is just a classic, the Ideal Soil version 2.0. I've spoken a lot with Estera on the phone in the past, and when he released 2.0, it jived with a lot of what we were seeing in potting soil, and he has a section in here on balancing potting soil. And so that really helped a lot with BuildASoil. So those are some of the books. Hopefully that helps answer your question. Thank you to everyone who puts their questions on here. I know we can't get on there and type out the answer to every single person's question, but with almost 200,000 people on here and growing, we really want to do our best to take the questions that we see over and over again or that seem very, very relevant and make sure that we get on camera and that I answer them as candidly as possible so we can keep these questions and answers around in perpetuity for everyone that has this question in the future. When they go to Google it, hopefully it pops up and they can get a real answer to a real question by a real grower. So thanks so much. Subscribe, like, tell your friends about this stuff, and I'll see you on the next BuildASoil FAQ video.